invited Steve McLean, pastor for over 30 years, 35 years?
33 years.
33 years at Argyle Presbyterian Church in Argyle, to come and share because their church used the NCD process. How did you get involved with this group, Natural Church Development?
Yeah, so after I had been at Argyle for about 15 years, we just felt like we ran into a wall. Our leadership, our session, and I just felt like the church wasn't moving forward. Everything we had tried up to that point, which seemed to lead to greater health, greater growth, just wasn't working anymore. And so we began to look for a church consultant or some kind of process that could help us to evaluate what we were doing, and to actually get out of sort of the circle of our room where we just all shared our best ideas, but they were limited to our experience. And so we contacted a number of pastors and churches, and Natural Church Development kept coming up as a resource.
And how did you find it to be a helpful tool?
Well, I mean, one of the things about NCD is they do a survey of key leaders in the church and their perspective on various characteristics of the church. And one of the things that I really liked about the questions was they asked you, like, in the area of loving relationship. They didn't ask you, are you a loving church, or do you care for one another? Because most churches would say, yeah, we are. They said, how many times in the past year have you been invited to have a meal at the home of somebody in the church? How many times have you invited somebody into your own home? So there were sort of more objective metrics that they were using to measure those things. You know, when we did that first survey, you know, you're familiar with NCD, it rates your church on the basis of 8 quality characteristics. And so when we got our scores back, and they said that our minimum factor, or our weakest part of our ministry, was something they called gift-based ministry. And the idea basically was that the ministry in our church was not organized around spiritual gifts. And so I said to the session, what do you think? Is this an accurate snapshot of us? And one of the elders said, I don't think I know what my spiritual gifts are. And then somebody else said, I don't think I know what mine are either. And then somebody said, I'm not sure I even know what spiritual gifts are. And it kind of went that way. And we said, yep, they nailed us. That was it. And it was a pretty accurate, I think, description of where we needed to put our greatest effort.
Okay. Good. So there's a survey that's taken by about 30 people in the congregation.
Yeah.
And then those numbers are run through to come up with your lowest out of these 8 characteristics. It gives you numbers for all of the characteristics, but you're encouraged to work on the lowest one.
Yeah, I mean, the theory behind Natural Church Development is that when we are under stress or pressure, we tend to focus on what we're good at. Yeah. So in our case, we were really good at developing holistic small groups. Mm-hmm. And so when we began to struggle, we just started more small groups and put more energy into training our small group leaders. And what their argument is, I think it's right, is that's not what's holding you back. The thing that's holding you back is the thing that they call the minimum factor, or what we might call our weakest link.
So you started working on that. What did that sort of look like?
One of the things they offered was a coach. And so we engaged a guy that was in our area who was trained to be a leadership coach, this was not his first rodeo, so for us it was. And he had been down the road, and he met with us, he did some seminars with us, he gave us some resources, and then we were off and running. We began to offer a process for discovering your spiritual gifts, using an inventory and biblical study and things like that. And I mean, it was amazing. The gift-based ministry just jumped significantly, almost to the top of all of the characteristics in terms of a strength. We had really made huge progress. And one of the things about the Argyle Church was, based on that experience, spiritual gifts became part of our DNA, part of our vocabulary. And so when we would talk about staffing a particular ministry, people would say, thanks for asking me to be a part of that. I don't think that's where I'm most gifted, but here is where I am. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't a excuse not to be involved in ministry, but here's a place I think I can serve better. And I mean, that was just wonderful.
You went through the survey process 5 different times. Right?
We did it 5 different times.
Now, what about your congregation? Was there pushback? Were there challenges there? How did you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, whenever you try something new like that, as you know, even in your own family, there's pushback. We haven't done this before. And I think with Natural Church Development, one of the pushbacks was their process is designed around you picking 30 people, I think it is, that are your key leaders in the church. Our thinking on surveys is they should be random. So we should just pick people randomly. And so there was some pushback on that, but I think we quickly got over that when we saw, you know, the questions they're asking. You want the people who know the church the best to answer them.
You're a pastor. You have a plethora of responsibilities. Now you've added NCD to it. How did you keep that from breaking you?
Well, you know, I mean, one of the things was I realized how important it was. You know, I mean, in a sense, I felt like I was spinning my wheels. Sure, I was busy, I was involved in a lot of things, but I didn't feel like I was getting traction, at least the traction I'd had earlier in my ministry. And so I saw this as a resource for helping me gain that traction. So, you know, whenever you do add something to your plate, you need to, I mean, hopefully you're smart enough to take something off your plate. And for us, that just became a priority. And boy, once we did it once, we saw how valuable that was. I know one of the things, Mike, you're interested in talking to folks about is being an NCD coach. So I just want to say again, it was just incredibly valuable to have that outside voice. You know, when I would say, here's what I think we ought to do, I mean, people listened to me, they trusted me, but they also realized I didn't know a whole lot more about this than they did. But when Randy would come in and speak and say, well, I was working with this church here, and they had this, and they did that, that was just really, really valuable. So again, that's a little bit investment of money, but having that outside voice was just really, really helpful.
So thank you, Steve. I appreciate you taking some time.
Great talking to you. Yeah. Great being able to talk to you guys.